Like every night, the lights of St. Augustine Hospital cast a peaceful glow over the city. But the hospital staff knew better. The fifth-floor operating room had been locked for years, and no one could explain why. Newly assigned security guard Daniel thought the stories were just superstition. But that night, as he made his rounds, something caught his eye. The elevator to the fifth floor was moving on its own. His heart pounded as he watched the numbers climb. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing an empty cabin. But the real horror lay on the floor. A thick, red liquid was slowly seeping out, spreading like an omen. Daniel flicked on his flashlight and stepped forward, his boots making a soft, squelching sound as they landed in the thick, red liquid that seeped from the elevator onto the floor. The stench was immediate, a mix of antiseptic, rot, and something metallic. He gagged, swallowing the bile rising in his throat. He swept the beam of his flashlight across the empty hallway. Silence. Nothing moved. Yet, the air felt thick, pressing against his skin like an unseen weight. His walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Dan, are you seeing this?" It was Jake, the security guard watching the hospital monitors downstairs. Daniel pressed the radio to his lips. "Yeah, I see it." The elevator moved by itself. A pause. Then Jake's voice, lower now. "No, man. The camera feed. I just saw something in the hallway." Daniel's pulse quickened. He turned his flashlight back down the corridor. Nothing. Just the rows of locked doors and the flickering emergency exit sign at the end. "What did you see?" "Not sure. It looked like a person, but weird. They moved strange, twisted." Daniel exhaled sharply. He knew the stories. The fifth floor was cursed. The staff called it the Forgotten Ward. Years ago, a power failure during an emergency surgery had cost several lives. Since then, the ward had been abandoned. No one went there willingly. Tonight, Daniel had no choice. He moved forward, his steps slow, measured. The dim overhead lights flickered above him. Each door he passed was locked tight, their frosted windows clouded with dust. Then he heard it, a whisper, low and breathy, just behind him. Daniel spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. The whisper came again, this time closer. His breath came short and fast. He reached for his radio, but before he could press the button, bang. The third door on the right rattled violently. Something inside was slamming against it. The metal handle shook. Daniel instinctively took a step back. Bang. Another impact. The door frame shuddered. Then, as suddenly as it started, silence. Daniel forced himself to move closer. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle. The cold metal stung his fingers. He hesitated, then twisted it. The door swung open. The room was empty, just an old operating table covered in a stained white sheet. Rusted four stands leaned against the walls. The air smelled of mold and bleach. Then he saw it. A single hospital bed in the corner. The mattress was covered in a pale, yellowed sheet, but something was underneath it, the shape of a body, motionless. Daniel's stomach twisted. He didn't want to check. He needed to check. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward. He gripped the corner of the sheet, pulling it back. The bed was empty, but the indentation remained, as if someone had just been lying there. Then a breath, right next to his ear. "Help me." Daniel jerked backward, crashing into the four-stand. The metal clattered against the tile. His flashlight flickered. The door slammed shut. His chest heaved as he rushed to the door, yanking at the handle. Locked. A sharp scraping sound came from behind him. He turned. The operating table was moving. A slow, deliberate shift, as if something beneath it was trying to rise. The metal legs screeched against the floor. Then the sheet rippled. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. A hand emerged. Thin, skeletal fingers clawed at the air, reaching, trembling. The sheet slid back further, revealing a face. Her skin was gray, stretched tight over sharp bones. Her eyes were gone, just black, gaping sockets. Her mouth hung open, lips peeled back in a silent scream. Daniel couldn't move. A woman. Then she turned her head toward him and smiled. The room exploded into chaos. The lights overhead burst, raining sparks onto the floor. A piercing alarm blared through the walls. The woman on the table lurched forward, her long, bony fingers stretching toward Daniel. He kicked backward, slamming into the door. His fingers fumbled for his radio. "Jake, get me out of here." Static. "Jake, do you hear me?" Through the crackling static, he heard something. A voice. Not Jake. A whisper. "He's not coming for you." Daniel's stomach dropped. The woman moved. Her limbs jerked unnaturally as she slid off the operating table. Her feet never touched the ground. She hovered, her body twitching in impossible angles. Daniel slammed against the door, pounding his fists. Then the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, but not from her. From the hallway, something else was coming. The shadow appeared under the door, stretching long and unnatural against the dim light outside. A second later, the door unlocked. Daniel threw it open. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, the elevator doors were open. Daniel ran. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The air behind him felt heavy, pressing against his back as if something was chasing him. The elevator doors began to close. No! He lunged inside just in time. The moment the doors shut, the lights flickered, and in the reflection of the metal panel, she was there, standing right behind him. The last thing Daniel heard was a whisper. "It's not over." The elevator plummeted. Then darkness. The next morning, hospital security found Daniel's walkie-talkie on the 5th floor, but there was no sign of him. CCTV footage showed the elevator arriving at the lobby at 3:06 a.m. The doors opened, but no one stepped out.